Free speech. It's the cornerstone of any functioning democracy, the right to speak truth to power, to call out bullshit when you see it. It's the right that protects all other rights. But right now, all around the world, that fundamental right is under attack. And frankly, it's more than a little bit terrifying. Over the next few minutes, we're going to shine a light on the increasingly insidious ways governments are trying to silence dissent and control the narrative. Spoiler alert. It involves more acronyms than a bowl of alphabet soup, and is significantly less delicious. Let's start with the digital space, shall we? Because apparently the powers that be think the internet is just the Wild West, a lawless land of memes and misinformation that needs to be tamed. And how do they plan to do that? With legislation, of course. We're talking about a whole slew of bills and regulations, often vaguely worded and open to interpretation, that essentially give governments the power to censor online content. They argue it's about protecting us from hate speech and misinformation. But let's be honest, folks. Who gets to decide what constitutes harmful speech? Because more often than not, these laws are used to target activists, journalists, and anyone else who dares to criticize those in power. It's like giving the government a giant delete button for anything they don't like, and that should make everyone a little bit uneasy. Remember that warm, fuzzy feeling you get knowing your government is looking out for you? Yeah, well, get ready for it to get a whole lot creepier. Because while you've been busy liking cat videos and arguing with strangers on Twitter, governments have been quietly building an infrastructure of surveillance that would make Orwell blush. We're talking about sophisticated programs that can monitor your online activity, track your location, and even intercept your private communications. All in the name of national security, of course. But when governments have access to this much information, it creates a chilling effect on free speech. People become afraid to speak their minds, to engage in open dialogue, for fear of ending up on some government watch list. And that, my friends, is a recipe for a society where dissent is stifled and critical thinking goes to die. You know who else is really bad at liking things they don't like? Governments. And you know who else tends to shine a light on all the shady stuff governments like to do? That's right, whistleblowers and journalists. These brave souls are the canaries in the coal mine of a free society. They expose corruption, hold the powerful accountable, and often pay a hefty price for doing so. We've seen governments go to extraordinary lengths to silence these truth-tellers, from slapping them with espionage charges to subjecting them to relentless surveillance and harassment. And when we allow governments to punish those who expose wrongdoing, we create a culture of impunity, where corruption thrives and the public is left in the dark. Now, if you're thinking, well, fine, I'll just take my dissent to the streets, think again. Because even the age-old right to protest is under threat. We're seeing a disturbing trend of laws being passed that restrict public gatherings, making it harder for people to make their voices heard. These laws often impose unnecessary permits, limit where protests can take place, and give law enforcement broad discretion to shut down any gathering they deem disruptive. And let's be clear, disruptive is often code for effective. Because let's face it, no one changes the world by politely asking for permission. Protests are supposed to be disruptive. They're meant to make people uncomfortable, to force them to confront injustice. But when governments can control where, when, and how we express our dissatisfaction, they're effectively silencing dissent before it even begins. Now, you might be thinking, okay, maybe they're making it harder to speak out, but surely they can't actually punish us for what we say, right? Wrong. Because in many parts of the world, people are being prosecuted for their words, for expressing opinions that governments find objectionable. We're talking about vague laws against inciting hatred or insulting public officials, laws that are often used to target activists, artists, and anyone else who dares to challenge the status quo. These prosecutions have a chilling effect on free speech, as people become afraid to express dissenting views for fear of legal repercussions. It creates a society where self-censorship becomes the norm, where critical thinking is stifled, and where the free exchange of ideas is replaced by a deafening silence. Look, I get it. This is a lot to digest. It's enough to make you want to crawl under your weighted blanket and never come out. But here's the thing. We can't afford to be silent. The fight for free speech is a fight for all our rights. It's a fight for a world where we can hold our leaders accountable, where we can challenge injustice, where we can speak truth to power without fear of reprisal. So what can you do? Educate yourself, stay informed about the issues, and support organizations fighting for free speech. Because the moment we stop talking, the moment we allow ourselves to be silenced, is the moment we surrender our freedom.